Alright, welcome back to the episode of the Nighttime series. Today, I am just pretty upset, man, because the Spider-Man Classic rework information has come in, and some gameplay as well, and it is just the most tragic thing ever, man. He looks abysmal, and today I just want to talk about, why I think the buff is so bad, why I think it needs a lot of tweaking, but I also want to talk about the Gorr buff to, lighten things up a little bit, because that is a buff I can get behind. That buff was amazing, and I just want to give my praises to it, because it's such a good buff. But yeah, a lot to talk about today, mainly buff oriented, so I do apologize for that because last night's episode is also about buffs as well. We'll get back to a regular schedule soon enough. So yeah, let's just get into it. So let's talk about the Spider-Man Classic buff first. Let's just go over all the abilities, then I'll go over my problems with the buff. So at first, there is a 25% chance to taunt the opponent on basic attacks, and a 100% chance if the opponent is stunned. That is, of course, a very good ability, because it's nice to just not have to worry about baiting out special attacks, right? So that's a pretty good thing. And now we're going to talk about the new thing that he has, which is the webbed up ability. So web hits on his special 1 and his SP3 inflict a webbed up passive, and more stacks equal more debuffs, right? So at 1 stack, you get a 10% suppression debuff. At 2 stacks, you get a 35% decelerate debuff. And at 3 stacks, you get a 25% debilitate debuff. And that's the core of his kit for the most part. So the SP2 inflicts a 3-second stun, right? But it can get increased because he does have access to a debilitate debuff. And while this stun is active, the opponent has minus 512 physical resistance per taunt on them. So this is his source of damage, and I say damage in quotation marks because, it's not really that much damage, man. He really just doesn't have any form of damage output that's, really good. This is his only form of damage output, and that's literally it. So yeah, the damage definitely has me worried, but now let's talk about the signature ability, because this is a pretty impactful signature ability. So at Sig, 200, he has a 20% chance to evade, and he doesn't trigger on blocking, so that's good that it doesn't trigger on block. The taunt duration and potency get a big increase. I don't know the exact number because it's bugged on the beta when I saw it. I'm not on the beta, but when I saw the screenshot from the beta, that's what it said. But just know that it does get a duration and potency increase, which is pretty good. And the webbing debuffs that you get can now stack up to 3. So yeah, there's the Spider-Man Classic buff info, and now let's just talk about why I do not like the buff. Honestly, I do not know where to begin, because there are just so many upsetting things about this buff, but I'm going to try my best. So, the most, infuriating thing is that we are in 2023, and there are still champions that have a ramp-up utility. Are you kidding me, man? In my personal opinion, this should just not exist at all. Ramp up damage is fine, because damage is, a whole different thing, but ramping up utility is so garbage, man. It's okay, so let's say you have She-Hulk, right? She-Hulk is notorious for her easy access to slow. Let's say She-Hulk has only a 33% potency slow until she throws 3 SP1s. Would you want to play She-Hulk as, a slow character? Or would you go for, Stealth Spidey or Shang-Chi, who has a full potency slow immediately when the fight starts? I'll answer for you. You will use Shang-Chi or Stealth Spidey. You will not use a character that takes 3 SP1s to get a full potency decelerate. So I do not understand why this still exists, because I will never use Spider-Man for his decelerate if it takes 3 SP1s to get to the full potency of it. That is just garbage. That is terrible. I will never utilize that. I'm going to go for She-Hulk, Spider-Gwen, Stealth Spidey, any champion that has a guaranteed slow and it has its full potency immediately, right? So that's one thing that I just cannot stand. The other thing is, if it wasn't painful enough to lock him behind 3 SP1s to get his full utility, it's also locked behind the signature ability. So not only do you have to throw 3 SP1 to get a full decelerate, you have to have him awakened as well, which is just the grandest time ever, right? It's they don't want this character to be good. It's I'm sorry, but it's they do not want this character to shine. So that is just the most tragic thing ever, that he has to not only be awakened, but he has to throw 3 SP1s to just get some form of utility. As if the nail wasn't in the coffin already, did I mention that his damage output just sucks? His damage output is terrible, man. His SP2 is his form of damage output, and he has a 3-second window up to 5 seconds with the debilitate of damage, and that's it. It is such a small window of damage output, and it really just is sad, man, because this guy is a Spider-Man character. Spider-Man characters always hit hard. It is crazy how they managed to flop so hard with his damage output. Man, this really is painful, because I like Spider-Man. Of course I love Spider-Man, right? He's such a cool character. He is okay, let's say someone interviews people, right? And they tell them to name a superhero. 99% of people are going to say Spider-Man first because he is the most notorious superhero ever. So I feel like he should get like the most justice when it comes to a buff. And this is definitely not it. Thankfully, this is the very early stages of his beta, so he will most likely get tweaked, but I don't really like... Okay, I do feel bad that I'm criticizing someone else's work, right? But if I don't criticize it, if people don't criticize it, then he will stay this way. He should not stay this way. He is a very not good champion right now. Like, as it stands, he is very, very bad. And if we don't say anything about it, then they will think that this is a fine version to release into the live server, but that is not the case at all. This is not a good champion to release into the live server. So that's why I don't really feel bad when I'm vocalizing my thoughts on the buff, because I'm spreading awareness to like MCOC, to like the developers, that this guy does need a lot of changing. He isn't good right now, right? He needs to be tweaked for sure. So those are my thoughts on the Spider-Man buff. Way too long to ramp up to his utility, right? If I were to change him, I would just make it to where the Accelerate is 100% potency immediately. He gets increased attack rating per debuff, and his like physical resistance decrease on the SP2 lasts for like 20 seconds instead of just like 5, right? That's how I would fix him. Gives him an easy access to damage output by having increased attack rating per debuff. Gives him an easier access to his Accelerate, and just that's honestly all he needs. And buff immunity, of course. I would just add that straight up because right now he has no way to counter Mystics, so that would be like a really good way to counter Mystics. So that's how I would fix him. So yeah, overall the buff was kind of disappointing for me. Well, not kind of, it was very disappointing for me. But now let's talk about a very good buff in my opinion, which is the Gorr the God Butcher buff. It is so crazy how like a 3-line change for Gorr has done so much more than a complete overhaul for Spider-Man Classic, right? Like, that is just mind-boggling. The Gorr buff was so little but so effective at what it did because it just made him so much more practical to play, and that was his biggest weakness before the buff. He was just so stressful before the buff because his durations just weren't good enough, right? His Undermine duration sucked, his Shadow Magic duration was pretty short. There was just like a lot going on with Gorr, but he was so hindered by the duration of his buffs and his Undermine, right? But now that's changed. Now he's like a much more practical character to use because his durations are much, much better. So that's a great thing, right? Additionally, like, I forgot how good he was at what he does, right? Like, his Undermine is very strong. The Undermine is such a unique ability because, like, it counters auto block, and it isn't really, like, counted as a true strike or anything like that. So it's his own unique buff, right? So it's pretty good for, like, Penny Parker and things like that. But Gorr is also just like a very strong damage dealer. Like, his damage output is honestly pretty dang strong. I never realized how strong it was. And I think I've been playing him wrong until now. But now that I've played him like the correct way, I'm just very impressed with like his damage output. So yeah, Gorr, a massive, massive win. Is he like the new Hercules? No, he is not the new Hercules. He is like probably a couple tiers below that. But he's still a very fantastic character. I feel like he is now a god, like just a god tier character. And I'm very happy because this like gives me hope for future tune-ups, right? So yeah, things are looking good. Gorr is a great character, and I'm just very happy overall. Of course, he does still have his flaws, right? Like, the no willpower thing still sucks. He is a bit light on utility, but the things he does very, very well. I just wish he did have like a bit more things, like utility-wise. But yeah, overall, very solid buff. I can't talk about the America Chavez one because I haven't tested her yet, but when I do that, I will like go over it as well. And yeah, I think that's it for today. I am sorry for like going on a rant. I know this is like supposed to be a peaceful series, but I just could not hold in my peace and talking about Spider-Man Classic because very disappointed in that. However, Gorr did lift up my spirit, so that's a good thing, right? But yeah, hopefully you have a good night, or like day, because you know, time zones, they do be existent. So yeah, but let me know your thoughts on the Gorr buff and the Spider-Man Classic buff, and that's about it for me.